I will call this meeting to order at 6:01 PM. This is a special meeting for Tuesday, May 11th, 2021, to conduct budget deliberations, or actually to pass the budget. Madam Clerk, would you please read the call of roll?
Tim Hale.
Here.
Stephanie Nowers. Here. George McKee.
Here.
Robert Yunt.
Here.
Moki Tu.
Here.
Jesse Sumner.
Here.
Tam Bovee. Here. Mr. Mayor, you do have a quorum.
All present in person, that's good. Any changes to the agenda? Budget deliberations tonight? Amendments, seeing none, the agenda is approved as presented. I'm going to give the manager a minute just to announce something that we think is really worth announcing.
All right, good evening, Mr. Mayor, Assembly. Just a quick update on Houston School. So we did open bids this morning. The low bidder total was just over $33.6 million. The current funding available for this project without FEMA funding is $34.1 million. So our low bid is below what we have for funding, which will allow us to bring forward legislation for contract approval at the June 1st Assembly meeting. So you'll be seeing that action for your consideration at the first regular meeting in June. Also, in addition to that, FEMA has agreed to a $36.2 million repair capped project. That's minus insurance, so we'll deduct the insurance from that. Basically, that means FEMA's in for $16.6 million and a cap project basically means that if there are any overruns above the $36.2 million, the borough would be responsible for that. So basically, we're in a position where we have a project we can award, and we have some additional latitude with regards to the FEMA funding approval for the repair, in this case, the replacement of that school. So great news for the borough and for the Houston community. So you'll be seeing that move forward here shortly, and the district will be notifying the school board, has notified the school board today of that as well. So just wanted to get that word out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Pledge of Allegiance. I'm going to have birthday boy, Senator Hale, lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It is actually Mr. Hale's birthday today. He told me ahead of the meeting it was cutting into his beer time. Sorry. Okay, audience participation. If you wish to speak to the assembly about any issue, obviously there's budget deliberations, but you have 3 minutes to talk to the assembly tonight. If you're on the telephone and would like to speak under audience participation, please hit *3. You will hear your hand has been raised. Everyone wishing to speak under audience participation has 3 minutes. I guess is there a list? Okay, you come on forward then. We'll get the mic on and welcome.
Thank you. Mayor, congratulations on your raise. I saw that in the paper. That's exciting.
Well, I think that's still up for discussion.
I'm just being optimistic. Thank you, Borough Assembly members. I'm Michelle Overstreet. I'm the executive director and founder of a nonprofit in the Valley called My House that helps homeless youth. We're busy. We have done 9 intakes in the last 2 days. So 9 new kids for a total of 436 active kids in the last 90 days. We see an average of 110 different contacts a week. So it's busy. And we just in March closed on the purchase of our building, which was very exciting. Special thank you to George McKee, who encouraged the Borough Assembly almost 3 years ago to give us money to help us buy that building. And that designation of funding made such a difference. When outside funders, we received $250,000 for that purchase from the Murdoch Foundation in Seattle. And one of the reasons we got that funding was because they looked at it and said their local governing body is supporting what they're doing, and it makes such a difference to them to know that you're behind what we're doing and supporting us. And so we're in the process of gearing up for a next step building that would offer housing and some additional job training. Our real forte is job training. We own 2 for-profit businesses that train and employ homeless kids. And in 2020, we train an average of 50 kids a year in either a Starbucks barista position or a thrift boutique with a steampunk theme. And in 2020, 100% of the kids that we trained were employed when we followed up with them in January. And so it's been 97 and 98%. This was the first time we hit 100. And our numbers are some of the highest across the country for success rates. Part of that is because the area that we're in economically, really the 1 and 2 tax base incomes for the city of Wasilla are food service and retail. So the things that we're training them on are really supported for jobs in that area. But there are a lot of other jobs. There's construction. We partner with NIT for that. We'd like to do more for those youth and help them move into jobs that are more livable wage instead of just starting jobs. And in the process of that, we'd like to ask for your help again. It's a one-time support. And if you're so inclined, we would love to have that. It really helps us garner funding from across the country to have your support. And thank you so much for all of you who have been down and had a cup of coffee, met some of the youth that we serve, and been part of our circle up to this point.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to the assembly? Mr. Yant? We could probably allow a question or two if you want to turn your mic on. Ms. Overstreet, I think you have a question here from Senator Yant.
Sorry,
That's okay.
thank you for the presentation. It's eye-opening. It's, as some of you may know, I've been around your program for a long time, and I really appreciate what you do. You guys are based in downtown Wasilla, which is probably why I'm so familiar with it, but you're really serving the whole community. And one of the things that you didn't mention that has always struck out as an awesome part of your program to me that you didn't mention tonight is your suicide rates. And so you guys got to understand they're dealing with very at-risk, high-risk children. And can you please tell us some of your statistics, please, because it's eye-opening.
I would love to do that. The population that we serve, first off, Alaska has the second highest right now rate of suicide across the nation. It's the #1 killer of youth age 14 to 24 is that take their own lives. And youth who are homeless are 6 times the national average for suicide. It's a very high-risk group. 67% of the clients coming in the door at intake say that they have thought about suicide or attempted. So it's almost 7 out of 10. It's a huge number. I have a young man who is a suicide prevention coordinator for us, and he is in the process of writing his own prevention program. There are a lot of programs around that raise awareness. There are very few that actually engage in prevention. And with the numbers that I just gave you, we have not had a completed suicide since 2015 in our program. And that's not just the active clients, that's anybody. And I will tell you that I believe that that's because 1, we develop long-term relationships with clients, and 2, we teach them that if they're hurting to that extent, to come and get help and not to go away, not to isolate. And we teach their friends that. So they have a circle of people around them that know what to look for, they know what to do, and they know where to go. We also have a team that gets up in the middle of the night if somebody calls, including myself, and we show up. And last week we were at Matsu Regional at 3:00 in the morning with a young man that we had gauze and duct tape. That's what we had. We had gauze and duct tape to work with that were holding his wrists from bleeding. It's very real. It's very challenging, but we do have people in our building that are passionate about preventing, well-trained and connective with the youth who are at risk. This team, I have 17 employees there, and this team knows what to do, and they do it, and they're willing to get up in the middle of the night and do that. So since 2015, we've not had a completed suicide. It's pretty incredible. So thanks for asking. Does anyone else have a question? George?
Mr. McKee?
Yeah, you indicated that the borough might consider giving you a little more financial aid. What are you talking about specifically?
Well, the building that we're looking at building is actually designed by an architect who graduated from Colony High School and then Harvard University. And in 2015, he won a Time Magazine award for a building designed for Skid Row that was specifically designed for homeless, with the downstairs or the main floor being retail shops where they can get job training and services, the second floor being office space, and then the upper floors being housing of different kinds. And so we're looking at that. It would be a multi-million-dollar project, but what we really just need is something to kind of get started with. We leveraged the last funding that you gave us, which was $100,000, into $500,000 to be able to buy our building. So we're good at leveraging, and whatever you would feel inclined to provide for us would give us at least a jumping off point.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Anyone else in the audience wish to speak to the assembly? Are there any telephonics? Got 3. Go ahead, Mr. Haberman. Okay, let's do a telephonic. Mr. Haberman reversed himself. First caller, please.
Good evening. My name is Marcy Hawkins, and I live in Sutton. And there's a little rumor going around that you may be decreasing the budget for the library. And if so, I had to speak out and inform you that this would be a bad thing. I mean, especially during this pandemic that we've had. If I didn't have my library, I would have gone in crazy. I've gone and gotten books. I have videos. I have audio. I was able to get online and do research for my job, which I had to do at home. The library is an economic engine for each of our 5 communities out here in the borough. And to decrease anything that has to do with the library is going to be harmful to the borough and its people there. I know I've sat on the library board. I've, been part of helping with the library. So I can only encourage you not to decrease this funding because it's vital for the community and for the people who live here. And if we have to go back to isolation again for a year, I'm definitely going to need my online catalog services. So please consider that when you're finalizing the budget, that this is something that is necessary, just like getting the roads paved, just like public schools. If you don't have a library, you really don't have a community. So I thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. Let's take our second telephonic caller, please.
Good evening. My name is Jessica Tremaine. That spelling is Tremaine. I am a resident of Sutton, Alaska, and I am also calling on behalf of the public library budget cut. From what I understand, these budget cuts look like they will be affecting the small community libraries, Sutton included. I'm also calling to speak up in my concern for this. We heard this evening from the representative of my house about youth and the youth need in the community. We have countless studies, we as a nation, on adverse childhood experiences. And one of the biggest preventatives for adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, is community resources. And that is assuring that your communities have safe, stable, and nurturing relationships. The library is undoubtedly a lifeline for that. We have youth groups that attend there. Parents are able to connect with each other. We have connections for our elderly, for singing classes, for mommy and me classes. It really is just something that embraces our entire community. People are able to go down there and do job applications and resumes, use it for faxing. I've used it for my job countless times whenever I needed to send a fax. And I really felt like I needed to speak on the concerns of a budget cut and how it may negatively impact our community as a whole, but particularly our youth that will be taking over this community at some point.
Okay, thank you. Any other telephonic callers? Next telephonic caller, please.
Hi, there are two people here to testify, and I'm going to go first. My name is Ruth Wood, and I was up here in Talkeetna talking to you when you were here, but I didn't know that you guys were going to come up with some of these proposed amendments. And I was really upset when I read that a proposal to cut mileage out of area-wide assembly tab B, page 61. District 7 is the largest district in the Mat-Su Borough. I live in Talkeetna. It's 60 miles away from Palmer. That's 160 miles round trip, and 45 miles away from Willow. That's 88 miles round trip. And I am very, very upset. Our assembly representative for years, even before this assembly representative, have been very good about coming up here for our council meetings, for chamber meetings, to meet with committees, etc. And that takes a lot of time that they are not paid for, and it takes a lot of travel, and that costs money out of their own pocket. I think it is a slap in the face to District 7 to remove that mileage, and I hope you will all vote against this proposed amendment. It really, I feel like you are taking my representation away from me. I also want to talk, when I pulled up all the proposed amendments, I couldn't believe the cuts to the libraries. And not only that, it doesn't appear that these cuts were reasoned out by discussing it with staff, by discussing it with the libraries, by discussing it with the public. This was not mentioned by anyone at the Talkeetna meeting up here. And yet there's a proposal to cut our library's fundings. That cutting that funding will close the library at least 2 days a week. I found that out because as soon as I read about these amendments, I called the library. It's going to be mean you'll have to release on-call staff. It means it's just, I don't even know what the cuts are gonna do, because they're not really made by looking at actual expenditures. They're just applying an arbitrary cut. And not only that, you can't cut based on 2020 because everything was so messed up in the borough. So I really want my assembly representative to be able to come up here and meet with the community many times. And I'm very grateful that they currently do that. And I want our library to be open. And the fact, I do not want cuts to be made arbitrarily. And I think you guys forget about us up in Talkeetna. And I would have hoped that driving all the way up here would keep us in mind. But apparently not. So I'm just really upset. And I want to be represented at the borough because I cannot come down there as often as you guys have meetings in Palmer. And the way I am representative is by having my assembly member listen to me. And I don't even need to say what's important about libraries because they are critical. And I also want to remind you that our borough is the size of the state of Pennsylvania. And that means you cannot just cut, and think you can still provide the goods and services that will make people want to live here. So if we want to become a stagnant borough, if we want people to start moving out of this borough, let's keep cutting the budget because that's what you're doing right now. And it's just...
Your 3 minutes are up. So did you say you have another caller that wants to speak?
Thanks very much. I couldn't hear any ding, so you had to tell me.
I gave you extra 30 seconds. So is there another caller there with you that wants to speak?
Yeah, I'm here, and my name is John Strassenberg, and I live in Talkeetna. I also oppose cuts to the library. These would be, as proposed, draconian cuts that would have severe effect. Libraries are essential to health and vibrance of the community, and Talkeetna has some great programs, particularly for kids. So don't cut. We need our library. The other thing I want to talk about is eliminating the proposal to eliminate mileage and expense reimbursement for assembly members traveling on official duties. Assemblyman Sumner justifies his amendment with a simple sentence: "We do not pay people to drive to work." Mr. Sumner seems to confuse the word commute with the word travel. Nobody pays people to commute to and from work. The assembly is entirely different. Assembly members must travel if they are going to be able to do what they were elected to do. Assembly members need to be able to travel to meetings, events, trainings, and so on. They need to meet with community leaders and members of the public, agency personnel. They need to see firsthand the circumstances facing the communities. This is all integral and necessary to effectively represent their constituents. Personally, when the septic pumper comes up here to pump our septic tank, he charges me travel time. I do not say to him, I should not have to pay travel because we should not pay people to drive to work. District 7 is the largest and most spread out district, with District 1 close behind. These far-flung districts require considerably more travel than, say, compact districts like those in the core area. It is more difficult and time-consuming for our large rural district assembly representatives to effectively represent the citizens. The borough should be acting to facilitate better representation rather than detracting from it. I want my assembly person, my District 7 assembly person, to be able to attend meetings and visit the community to see firsthand our concerns and understand them. This amendment would hamstring the ability of our representative to effectively represent us. So I urge you to reject this ill-conceived amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other telephonics? Anybody else in the audience? Mr. Haberman? Anytime now, Mr. Haberman.
My name is Eugene Carl Haberman. I follow the public process. When the public process is done appropriately, the decision made by the governing body is more likely in the public interest. Okay, a couple of scenarios. Number one, you had the budget released to the public when? About 5 days. It was on the website 5 days before the first public hearing. That's what was the end result of that. I warned you earlier, and look what we have. How do you expect to receive a conversation with the public when you don't even get about 5 days before the first public hearing? And then those other locations of the hearings, there's over 100,000 people in the valley. They did not have an opportunity to call in unless they were physically there, whether it's in an art center or whether it was over in Talkeetna area. And that was totally despicable. Next is there's several amendments that you've gotten relating to the wages of the assembly members and travel and so forth. I brought this up, the scenario, and I mentioned respectfully at the last regular meeting of the assembly, you had passed an ordinance that increased the salary of the mayor, and I responded with the mayor present that this item needed to go to the salary examiners. There's a requirement that they meet at least every 2 years. They use the word shall. They haven't met in quite some time. And note this, who's on the board. Assemblymember Rabiant made a response that says, "We are the board. We are the board." You're wrong. You've got a conflict of interest. You need to reinstate that and get members on there, and you need to go back one step further. You need to go back in the records to see when the last time they met and their proposals of what the salaries for the school board, you all, and so forth. And then any increase to that above what they stated, you need to backtrack to what they stated. I suspect that you've been receiving, and other assembly members and mayors have been receiving money in excess to what that particular board had met and stated. Okay, and another thing, the one item I noted, the port, zero funding, called for federal investigation, mismanagement of the borough. This is no time. You need to full support the Port of Alaska and Anchorage and cease any funding for the port. Has years of mismanagement and little faith in the public to what you're doing. And smiling Rabiant on that, his position on the board commission is a conflict of interest. You cannot put assembly members on the port commission. They are deciding as assembly members, you need to separate that, and that's absolutely wrong. And then, how much more time do I go? Oh, my time's up, but I suspect you're not going to ask any questions. And remind you, when you ask questions, you don't comment.
Okay, thank you. Any other telephonic, anybody else in the audience wish to speak to the assembly? If not, I'm going to close audience participation at this point in time. And something I was supposed to do before audience participation is Mr.
I think you got another telephone.
Okay. Like I said, we are reopening audience participation, and our telephonic caller, please.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, yes, this is Brenda McCain calling from Willow. And I've been listening, I listened to the budget hearing up in Talkeetna, and this is the first that I've heard about cuts to libraries and cuts to mileage for our representatives from this area. And I'm kind of shocked by both of them. You know, we've worked so hard for so long to have a new library built in Willow, and it's under construction now. And to hear that it may be cut, to hear that the hours to the library could be cut and services cut there, it's pretty appalling. You know, we've worked so hard for so long. The library in Willow, as in most rural areas, is the heart of the community. So much goes on, from the reading programs to many, many groups. And it just seems foolhardy. It's where so many people get so many services, and it's where they come to use the internet, and it's just truly the heart of the community. And I think that that's a sin to cut that. Our borough assembly person here travels more than anybody, I believe, to go to meetings all over her district here, and I can't see the logic of cutting reimbursement for that. It's just, she does such an amazing job trying to get to all these areas and everything. And I think I would call that penny wise and pound foolish. And I think it's disgraceful to even suggest cutting that. So thank you very much.
Okay, is there another telephonic caller? So go ahead, please.
My name is Bob Kupach.
Go ahead, sir.
My name is Bob Kupach, spelled CHLUPACH. I am respectfully against the amendment to zero out mileage and expense reimbursement. In our district, District 7, our assembly member is doing perhaps one of the most comprehensive efforts of representation we in the district have ever seen. Being in District 7, as you know, reaches far and wide. beginning with the boundaries at Meadow Lakes and going westerly, which would include Yetna and Squetna, and the northern boundary being the Denali Highway, which, as you know, includes Trapper Creek and Talkeetna. With the comparatively greater distances our assembly member has, the amendment clearly jeopardizes the representation of all people in the district. Taking away this stipend would greatly affect public representation of all of our people in District Number 7. I, Bob Krupatch, want to go on record as opposed to the amendment to zero out mileage and expense reimbursement. The amendment has no consideration of the personal travel time expended of our assembly member. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other telephonic callers? Anyone else in the audience wish to speak to the assembly? For the second time tonight, I will close audience participation. And before we move on to the budget deliberations, Mr. Brown, the manager, is going to do an award. So we'll start with that.
Yeah, we're going to do some recognition tonight. I'm going to invite Chief Keenan up to the microphone. He'll introduce it, and then the mayor will join the chief as well as the awardees tonight, and we'll read the citation.
I just found out I was going to speak to this, so I'm going to wing it. On the evening of March 28th, about 2 o'clock in the morning, our A shift at Station 6-2, who you'll meet tonight, were dispatched to a fourplex fire just down the road from the station. The way the page went out was we had multiple people still trapped in the building, and they were on the phone with them, the dispatch center was. Rescue Engine 6-2, which was less than a mile away, arrived on scene probably within 3 minutes. Captain Schkau, the leader of the crew, performed a rapid size up, stated that they were gonna hit the fire real quick and go interior. And at the same time, his driver operator, after he charged the hose line, started throwing ladders to remove 2 people trapped on the roof. So within 5 minutes, the 2 people on the roof were rescued, and Captain Schkau and his firefighter, Robert Brown, went inside and rescued a 3rd occupant from the 2nd floor. Now, they were trapped because the fire started in front of the building in the vinyl doorway and filled the hallway full of smoke, so they couldn't get out. So by the time I got there, I ended up being the incident commander on scene, trying to organize everything. It was pretty much said and done. That crew of 3 saved at least 3 lives, saved the building, put the fire out within seconds of arriving on scene, and did a really good job for us. So that's what these awards are for tonight, special recognition. I want to add one thing. I've been in the fire service now for 35 years. I've taught a lot. I always explain to the guys, what we're here for is saving lives. We don't have that opportunity too often. Most of the time we get there too late. So when we get this opportunity to recognize a crew that does a good job like this, it's pretty important to us. So I appreciate what we're doing here tonight, and I appreciate you guys supporting the fire department.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Mayor, if you'll join the crew down there, and we'll invite the 3 awardees forward. I'll read the citation as the mayor and Chief Keenan make the presentations.
You want them up here, Mayor?
The Department of Emergency Services hereby awards special recognition to Captain Adam Schau, Firefighter Robert Brown, Firefighter Dustin Croft for excellence in performance of duties on this day in May of the year 2021. Each of you has demonstrated yourself as an exemplary firefighter responding to 2 working fires in 1 shift. As members of Station 6-2, a shift crew, you mitigated property loss on 2 structures with sound tactics and preserved the lives of 3 people. You demonstrated excellent teamwork and efficiency. You represent the best of us. Thank you. Signed, Bernhalter, Matanuska-Susitna Borough Mayor.
everyone to kind of move over here to your right. Off, please. Okay. Smiles. One, count three. 1, 2, 3. Another one. Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Congratulations. That's a fine-looking young bunch serving the Matsu Borough, so we really appreciate that. Okay, I guess we should get down to business for this evening. Our only agenda item, deliberations and possible adoption. I want to emphasize that adoption part of the fiscal year 2022 budget. Madam Clerk.
Ordinance 21021, an ordinance appropriating monies from the central treasury for the borough operating funds, enterprise funds, education operating fund, and capital funds, establishing the rate of levy for all borough functions for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2021, and ending June 30th, 2022, and setting the surcharge rate for the wireline and wireless enhanced 911 systems for the period of July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. The main motion's on the floor. You have your pink amendment packet. Why do I see so many hands up? Mr. Hale?
I suppose it would be inappropriate for me to call a question right off the bat, so I won't. But I just wanted to say I'm prepared to adopt this thing as is right now.
Ms. Nowers, and this is the last one, by the way. Okay.
I just, I'm a big proponent of the public process, and unless the maker of the amendments, most of these amendments would like to withdraw them, I just think that there's been very little notice on some of these, and I'm not one for stretching out more meetings, but I wonder if we could have discussion tonight to answer some of the questions on these, but not vote on them until Thursday night. So basically get some work out of the way tonight and give the public a chance if they want.
This is how it's going to work. We have a pink amendment packet that Madam Clerk took the time to prepare for you. They're in order. You'll see up the upper right-hand corner, amendment number. So the first amendment we're going to start with will be 1. You go right through the packet and number your amendments. If they pass, they'll be listed as passed. If they fail, they'll be listed as failed. Or if they're withdrawn, your list is drawn. So we'll go right through the packet. The only one that you might want to pay attention to will ultimately be amendment number 3, mayor's salary. So I'll recuse myself from that discussion again. And Assemblywoman Bowlby will take over on that amendment number 3. So we'll start with amendment number 1, Madam Clerk. Or I guess this is Mr. Sumner. He'll read it. Is that how you want to do it? Or, Mr. Sumner, this is yours.
I move to amend non-area-wide services community development as follows. Division 503 Sutton Library by striking $351,423 from the overall budget and inserting $326,200 in its place for a reduction of $25,223. Division 504 Talkeetna Library by striking $443,171 from the overall budget and inserting $370,743 in its place for an overall reduction of $72,428. And Division 505 Trapper Creek Library by striking $230,031 from the overall budget and inserting $190,307 in its place for an overall reduction of $39,724. And I'd speak to my amendment. So I don't believe that this is actually going to affect the operations of the libraries one bit. I've been here for a few years and I've noticed that whatever we budget, the actual expenditures will be lower. I've also noticed that the fund balance of the non-area-wide fund seems to grow year after year. It's now $2.4 million surplus fund balance in the non-area-wide fund, which represents somewhere on the order of 40% of the revenue from the non-area-wide tax sitting in surplus fund balance. So we overfund these budgets. The money doesn't get spent. That's tax dollars from non-area-wide revenue, which is everybody outside the city is paying too much tax because we are passing a budget that's larger than what we actually need to spend. I came to these figures by taking the actual budget of 2020 and adding 3% compounded per year to arrive at these figures. I did not change Big Lake Library's budget because if you look at it, the proposed budget for this year is actually already lower than the 2020 actual budget. Maybe that should actually be raised, I don't know. And Willow, I did not reduce the proposed operating budget at all because with the library construction, I believe that they will actually need flexibility and there may be changes in the operations. These other libraries, there's not been any substantial change in the operations and there's not really any reason to assume that there would be greater than a 3% per year compounded growth in expenses down there. So in an effort to reduce the non-area wide mill rate and reduce the substantial surplus that we have that represents taxpayer money that's been taxed and not spent, just sitting in our bank account, I do propose these reductions. Thank you.
Okay, we'll start with Ms. Bovee, and who's next? Go ahead, Ms. Bovee. then
Thank you,
Hale.
Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm opposed to this for a number of reasons. Not the least of which is the fact I don't appreciate an amendment like this coming forward after the budget hearings. And this is something the communities absolutely will be impacted by and should have had an opportunity to comment on. Secondly, these are not in your district. So hands off. May we have a report from staff as to what this impact would actually look like?
Mr. Brown?
I would like to speak in support of this
Well, we got to
amendment.
wait, Ms. Bovee, as soon as Ms. Bovee finishes up, she's
Okay.
asking the manager to give a quick report, staff report.
So I'll invite Mr. Phillips forward or Mr. Leslie. I will tell you, this came in pretty late, so it's difficult to ascertain the impact when you haven't had a lot of time to do an analysis. So I want to caveat whatever these gentlemen will say here in a moment, that we haven't had a lot of time to analyze this.
Good evening, Eric Phillips, Community Development Director. As Mr. Brown said, we really haven't had a chance to evaluate, actually what the operational impacts of this would be. I can say of the 15 operating budgets that I have within community development, the library budgets are by far the skinniest, leanest budget that we have. They operate on the shoestring. Salaries and wages comprise 75% of the operating budget at these libraries. The cost increase drivers are obviously salaries and wages, insurance costs like liability insurance, and also communication technology surprisingly costing us a great deal more than it was in the past. So those three cost drivers are something that neither Hugh nor I have control over. We can't cut them without cutting services. And I guess that's not our role in this, is to propose service cuts to the libraries. And lastly, I would just say that if you're looking at 2020 actuals, Mr. Sumner's right. There's about a 15% difference between budget and actual numbers. But I would also remind you, when using 2020 actuals, we had COVID for 4 months out of our fiscal year. So there's nothing about FY2020 that was normal from an operational standpoint for the ice rinks, the pools, or the libraries. So I just caution you on that. Anyway, that's all I had.
And then, if I may, Mr. Mayor, I do want to acknowledge Mr. Sumner's point. Like, I understand the budget to actuals when we see that difference. That's one of the reasons in the proposed budget that we presented a 4% reduction in the non-area wide mill rate. So we already see some room for improvement there. And that's why we proposed a non-area wide mill rate reduction from 0.511 down to 0.49. And that's something we'll continue to evaluate as we move forward. And many of those reductions occurred in animal care, which we'll discuss at a later time.
Okay, now we'll go to Mr. Hale, then Mr. McKee will be right after Mr. Hale.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say I am absolutely opposed to this. First of all, public libraries are like one thing that is really good about government. It's like the one thing that really makes it all worthwhile. Second, I'll note that these cuts are going out to the most rural and most far-flung parts of our borough who do not get, I can speak from experience, people in Sutton do not get their money's worth out of their tax dollars that they give to the borough. And cutting their library is going to reduce those services that they get from the borough even more. And I just think that it's gross. Lastly, I'd like to note this letter that we all should have in our packet here that we got from Nancy Bartels, who is with the Friends of the Sutton Library. These cuts will have a devastating effect on these facilities. In Sutton, a cut of $25,233 would totally eliminate the entire budget for on-call staffing or totally eliminate the books and subscriptions budget, one or the other. With a permanent staff of 1.75 in Sutton, on-call staff is vital to the operation of the facility. I will be opposing this.
Okay, now, Mr. McKee, I got back to you.
No, I withdraw what I was going to say.
Okay. Who we got? Mr. Yant?
I got a couple of questions for staff and for Jesse. So whoever can help me answer these is whoever's best. So the 3%, is that reasonable? Is that pretty standard across the board for inflation for employees? Is that a pretty good safe number, Mike?
So through the mayor to Mr. Yunt, I mean, generally, when we made our budget presentation up front, generally speaking, we were projecting about a 2.5% growth in expenditures. But that doesn't hold true necessarily in every case, particularly when you have smaller budgets. But generally speaking, yeah, I think 3% is fair in an average year. Does that seem fair, Ms. Heindel, or anything to add to that?
I would only add through the mayor to the assembly member yet. 3% is probably fair for operating expenditures. However, realized wages went up contractually 3.35, yeah, percent. Okay.
I got a quick question for Jesse. I see the cuts to the 3, but how many libraries was it that you chose not to make these cuts to, and why was that again?
That was 2 libraries. One was the Big Lake Library because their proposed budget is already lower than their 2020 actual expenditures. So I'm not really sure how that's supposed to work. I guess they realized some savings. And the other one was the Willow Library because with the new construction, I figured that we ought to give them budgetary flexibility since things will be reorganized quite possibly, or they may hire additional people. But there's a discontinuity in operations down there, so it may change. Could I say one other thing? I don't mind not making these cuts, but I do not believe that this money is going to get spent. If we don't make the cuts, I would prefer to not pass such an unbalanced budget in that expenditures exceed revenues so much, and that's why I'm proposing the cuts of money that I do not believe that will be spent. But I am willing to just cut the non-area wide mill rate. We have a substantial surplus, and that's really what I'm trying to get at here. Is I want to spend down.
Let's
some
stay
of the
on focus on these libraries.
Well, I believe it's pertinent
We're not
because the
gonna
intent
expand
is to
horizon.
reduce the.
Okay.
Yeah.
Stay on focus.
And then one last question, if I may. Do we, and it's, again, it's possibly short notice, but do we have the 2019 actuals? Is that something that we have right here? Because, well, 2020 being a COVID year, is it possible that 19 was way higher, right? Did we, when I hear, like, I know the swimming pools weren't open last year, right? I know the ice rinks weren't, but I don't ever recall any libraries being shut down. I could be wrong about that, and obviously I was, and that's okay. So I was just wondering if we have the 2019 actuals from these three libraries. That would mean a lot to me to see.
Through the mayor to Assemblyman Yunt, we did shut down actually to the public. We kept some of our staff employed, actually doing a complete cleansing of all the facilities, because remember, all those books and all those materials are touched by the whole community. And quite honestly, we didn't know how this virus was transmitted at the time. And so we literally washed every book in every building. And then after a short period of time, we were able to offer curbside library where you could come and get materials. And then we eventually slowly began to open, and we're still at, I believe, 50% occupancy. One of the things that I do want to mention as it pertains to Big Lake, the reason the Big Lake Library dropped so much is our long-term librarian, Joe Cassidy, retired. And so the wages dropped substantially there. And most of the increases that you see in here are out of Eric and my control. The liability insurance in some of these cases doubled, which we have no control over. Benefits went up. The IT component that we have no control over went up. So if you look at where we would have to cut, and as Nancy Bertel said, the cuts that are being proposed would potentially eliminate all of our on-call staff, because everything else is sort of a fixed expense. And how the borough wishes to keep the facilities open, after that point, we will work, of course, to make that happen. But I do see a real struggle. We try and keep 2 staff members at opening and closing so that we don't have a single person at a rural library in the dark in January getting out of their car or having to go out to their car. We had a situation in Willow a few weeks ago where we have a person who has some substance abuse problems bothering staff. We actually had to ask that person to cease coming to the library. I took a complaint today from our Big Lake librarian about an obscene phone caller who was making, I can just say obscene gestures to our library staff. So it's really important that we maintain that level of staffing out there. I apologize for going long.
Mr. McKee.
But you didn't answer the question. Do you have the 2019 total budget figures for those libraries in question?
I do not have them with me,
Ms.
no.
Heindel, can you answer?
I don't have the individual libraries broken out just yet. I can run a report and bring that back. But in 2019, the total expenditure for all libraries was $1,524,259. And that's the audited numbers.
And what was the total for 20 through the mayor to?
The total for 20 was $1,565,147.
So may I then reiterate or confirm 19 was 1.524?
Yes,
20 was 1.565?
yes.
So 2020 was $41,000 more than 2019,
Yes,
even
yes.
through the pandemic?
Mhm.
Okay. I'm in full support of this. I'm done asking questions.
Who is up next? Ms. Nowers? And then, oh, excuse me. Ms. Bovee, then we'll go to Ms. Nowers.
Mr. Leslie answered my question. Thank you.
Ms. Nowers?
Thank you. I did look back at 2019 for some of these. And if you look back at, say, Sutton Library, it was $318,000 in 2019. So if you're looking at kind of cost increases amortized over years, that'd be something to look at, and you get a more reasonable amount than looking at 2020. Talkeetna was 343. I do agree with the assembly members that libraries are an incredible resource, and they're incredible resource, especially in rural areas. And the problem I have this, while I sympathize with the non-area wide fund increasing, this appears to be made without consultation. So, different things happen at different libraries. There may be reasons that you see more going up. And this just seems to penalize what I think Assemblymember Hale said is something that government does really well. So I think we need to go back to the drawing board on this and take the funding from, if you feel like there's a good place to do it, but this is not the place to do it.
Okay, we ready to vote on amendment number 1? Or do you want to do some more discussion?
Could we postpone?
You could.
I thought we were gonna, Assemblyperson now said she kind of like to look at this next time around.
Yeah, but that's not how Mayor Halter works. We're going to vote on it.
Wait a minute. Okay, I propose an amendment to this, a postponement. I want to postpone this for 7 days.
We don't have meetings in 7 days. We've got one Thursday night.
Okay, I want to postpone it till Thursday night.
So we have a motion to postpone amendment number 1 from tonight to Thursday night. You oppose that, Mr. Hale?
Yeah, I'm opposed to that. I have a day job.
Okay. Any objection to Mr. McKee's motion? Okay, Mr. Hale objects to the motion to continue to Thursday night, so go ahead and vote for the clerk, please.
If you vote yes, you'd vote to postpone this amendment to May 13th. Mr. Mayor, it passed with Assemblymember Hale opposed.
The old kicking the can down the road is off and running. Amendment number 2, Mr. Sumner.
I move to amend non-area wide services, assembly, animal care, and regulation by striking $2,695,113 from the overall budget and inserting $2,355,198 in its place for an overall reduction of $339,915. And I'd speak to it. The reasoning here is similar. We've been building a substantial fund balance and non-area wide, and actually animal care is the worst perpetrator of the bunch. We fund them substantially over expenditure. And there's just really no reason to pass a budget that much larger than what you're actually going to spend. And so this would represent, again, a 3% compounded growth from the 2020 actuals. And I think that's pretty reasonable as opposed to the proposed figure, which is 21%, a total of 21% higher than the actual expenditures in 2020, which is basically just a way of socking away taxpayer money in a fund that is already grossly overinflated. We can reduce the non-area wide mill rate, and I don't believe that there'll be any impact to actual services.
Ms. Bovee?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's my understanding that we already significantly cut this budget. Is that correct?
Through the mayor to Ms. Bovee, that's correct. We reduced the FY21 budgeted amount, and the FY22 proposed was reduced by 7%. That represent, so a 7% reduction from 22, what's in the proposed 22 from 21. And I guess I go back to the point, I acknowledge that we have seen a fund balance growing in non-area wide. That's exactly why we proposed a 4% reduction in non-area wide mill rate. And Mr. Hayes is available for some perspective on why the 2020 actuals and 2021 are what they are if the assembly is interested.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Hayes.
George Hayes, Deputy Borough Manager and currently the acting Animal Care Director for the last 3 months. 2020 was a really unusual year. You can see, in fact, our actuals in 2019 were $100,000 more than they were in 2020, even though 2020, we added two positions. That's why the big increase happened when we hit the budget for going up from 2020 to 2021, and it was 2.8 million that year. And I reduced that 200,000 because it looked like we overestimated what it would cost for that manager position and for the dispatcher position. So trying to compare the actuals in 2020 with the budget for this year doesn't quite match up because we've got 2 extra full-time positions in there, which if you add all the benefits and all that comes out to about 200,000 more. So I cut the 200,000, we've got another 200,000 more, and there is a much more increase than the 3%, absolutely, but it's due to those 2 extra positions. The manager position is about 113,000 total. That's benefits and salary. And then the dispatcher position is about 50,000. So it doesn't quite match up if you take the budget to actuals. Now, I will tell you also that in 2020, our veterinarian left, and she was a long-serving, maxed out on the pay scale, as well as our maintainer, who had been here over 20 years, and our most senior officer all left that year. And so the budget numbers didn't match up to what the budget was and what was spent because all of those had gone that year. I think I cut wherever I could in the budget and made account for those 2 positions. One of the positions is filled, but our manager position is still not filled. As you know, we've got a brand new director who will start next Tuesday, and he is already looking at the candidates who have applied for that manager position. He has also filled 2 out of the 4 vacant shelter assistant positions. So I'm looking for big things to happen with the new director that's down there. And I think we will come pretty close to spending this amount that's the 2.6 million. Like I say, even though it's a lot more than the actuals projected or the actuals shown in 2020. Subject to questions.
So we got Mr. Sumner, Mr. Yount, and Mr. McKee.
I guess you partially answered my question, but how many total budgeted vacant positions are there down at that department?
5.
5. And what would you say the average number of funded vacant positions is? Because
we have a pretty high rotation in the shelter assistant positions. They only make those are on calls, and so we only make about 20,000 a year. Typically is about 1 or 2, but we've had some difficulty, I guess, in the past several months with getting things going. I'll leave it at that. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but that's why we have 5 empty positions now.
And so you believe that all 5 positions will be filled, or that there'll be a reduction in the number of average vacant positions down there?
I do. We have about 30 applicants for the shelter manager position. That one should be filled, I would say, within 2 weeks after Chris Loskar comes back from leave on Tuesday. And he filled through a board yesterday, he filled 2 of the vacant shelter assistant positions. And then we're going to reopen that for the other 2 positions. He only had 4 candidates and he selected 2 of those. So I expect he will fill those in short order.
Okay, let's see. Mr. Yount?
I think it's fair to mention, we talked about this earlier with the libraries, but when higher paid employees retire and then, they bring in new employees, they're going to start on the lower scale. I do think it's fair to adjust a budget for that. I think that's a fair thing to say. Jesse, I understand where you're going with all this. I really do appreciate it. I don't think any taxpayers truly want to invest in their local government, right? But what I mean by that is we want, as taxpayers, great services for our money, but we don't want the these inflated budgets that are continuously not met. And then to have these funds just continue to grow and grow and grow. If people want to invest money, there's better places to do it than overpaying on taxes every year. So regardless of what happens with this amendment, I do support, I understand where you're coming from. I appreciate what you're doing as a taxpayer myself. And I think it's important that people, they're given good services for what they pay for. And I think that's happening. I think we got Mrs. Cheyenne and I met today. We've got a well amount of money in reserves. We got close to $500 million in investments, cash investments in other places. Now that's in different areas and different things, but what are we shooting for, right? So should we lower taxes? Should we lower the mill rate? We've been talking about that. That's been the goal, to get it down to 9.9. I appreciate what you're doing. So thanks.
Let's see, Ms. Bovee, then Mr. McKee.
My question was,
Mr. McKee.
Yeah, I just have a question for Mr. Hayes through the mayor. Does your budget still have the $150,000 in it for the large animal enclosure?
In the capital budget, that is in there, but not in this operations budget.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. And if I could address through the mayor to Assemblymember Yunt, I wanted to talk about the actuals for the previous ones. We were pretty much on track. For instance, 2017, we were only over by 59,000. 2018, we were only over by 20,000. 2019, it went up to 186, and then we had that anomaly year of 2020, and that was the 333,000. It was because of the bunch of senior people who all left that year in the vacant positions. So,
Ms. Nowers.
Thank you, Mayor. I just also want to say I appreciate what Assemblymember Sumner is doing in looking at the budget. I went back and I looked at 2019 actuals on this one because I don't think you can just take 1 year. And it was 2.3 million. So if it's a 300,000 increase over those 3 years, it's more like 4.5%. So, and I think the issue with animal care has just been chronically understaffed, is my impression from stopping by there. So the goal is to fill those positions, not cut it. So I can't support this one, even though I do support the efforts on the non-area wide, but this isn't the place again.
Okay. Let's vote on amendment number 2, which means you'd have to close out debate. Is somebody willing to do that? Any objection to passing amendment number 2? Okay, we have objections, so Madam Clerk.
Go ahead and vote, please. Mr. Mayor, it failed with Assemblymember Sumner, Assemblymember 2, and Assemblymember Yunt in favor.
Okay, now we're going to go to amendment number 3, so I'll turn this over to Madam Bovee, and I'll recuse myself for this huge pay raise I'm going to get.
It's Assemblymember McKee's. Assemblymember McKee, if you want to move amendment number 3.
I move to adopt ordinance 21021, which strikes the mayor's salary of $29,975 and inserts $50,000 in its place, and I'd like to speak to it. In a way, I wish the mayor was here, because what has happened, it's not that Mayor Halter or Mayor DeVilbiss did not do what was expected of them. Our expectations have changed. Before, we said, really, a part-time mayor would be fine. He could have a business, he could hold a job, after all, and 29,000 would take care of it. Okay, but in fact, what has happened is our expectation has changed of the Matsu Borough. We would like to see it grow. It is a bedroom community of Anchorage. We'd like to see it be a big bedroom community of Anchorage, okay? To be more than that. That takes promoting, actually promoting the area. And I want to give you a good example of what I'm talking about. I recently had occasion to try to make reservations in a hotel in Fairbanks, Pikes Landing to be precise, for the 13th through the 16th of May. They are booked solid for the next 2 weeks. There is no hotel room there, okay? And why isn't there a hotel room there? Well, for one thing, they are a tourist destination, okay? They are a destination for industry, for mines. One of the problems that's filling up the hotel rooms up there are people who are coming in to do specialized work on the various mining equipment we have around. We do not have anything like that here in the Matsu Borough. We have got to, in fact, promote this a little bit better. I was talking to Mr. Phillips earlier. Look, there's a proposed trail that goes from where you could ride a four-wheeler from Wasilla to Fairbanks. Okay, that'd be a great tourist attraction. How many of you even have heard of it? Okay, I suspect you haven't. I haven't. Okay, so we need somebody who's going to pitch this. The second thing is we need somebody who is going to, in fact, appear before the state legislature and has the stature of an elected official to plead our case for what we want from the state. That was the reason why I submitted this, okay? If indeed the assembly feels that, no, we really don't want to expand the economics in the Matsu Borough, then let's stick with the salary we have right now. If indeed we want to expand it, then let's look at, in fact, having a full-time elected mayor who goes out and makes us known not only locally, but outside the state of Alaska as a place to do business. That's why I introduced this.
Assemblymember Young.
Thank you. So as I stated in the last meeting, and I wanted to speak to the mistake I made, my vote, it was incorrect. I thought we were voting to continue tie. Anyway, it doesn't matter now, you guys know. So I asked Mr. Brown to help me out in the last week. I said, could you please let me know what the average Matsu Borough employee makes, right? It would just, for me, it's a starting point. Everybody here works super hard. Take the lowest paid, take the highest paid, average it together. And that, just so you guys are aware, that number was $73,157.41. On what Mr. McKee said, I do think that the expectations probably should be increased. Even at whatever, if we come up with another number, it's still substantially lower than other communities pay their mayor. One of the first taxes that we looked at possibly, and we're still gonna have to look at taxes in the future possibly, was a tax on gasoline. And I spoke out before as to why I'm so against that. Many of the people in this community have to commute to Anchorage for high-paying jobs. That bothers me, right? What can we do as a group to fix that? How many high-paying jobs can we create out here? We don't have time to do it, and we're not paid to do it. This is basically a volunteer position, right? So there used to be somebody here, my understanding is there used to be an employee at the Matsu Borough who was focused on economic impact, and that position's no longer there. I really see where you're going with this, George. I'm not, I don't know if now's the right time, but I would like to put forth an amendment. I think I have to wait though. My reconsideration's next week, right?
Just to clarify to the assembly, to make a change to the mayor's salary, it takes a code change and then it takes a budget change. So we're in the middle of the process of the code change, which is with the legislation that's coming back to you next week. Right now, this just changes the budget. So you'd have, if you're wanting to make a change, you can do that or make an amendment. You can do that now, and you can also make the same amendment during the code change next week. So it's two different areas that it needs to occur in.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I'd like to propose an amendment to change the mayor's pay to 73,000. Well, to change the budget to $73,157.41 exactly. And as George says, the voters are going to change their expectations.
Is there any discussion?
All right. What do you want to do with it, folks?
Okay, oh, sorry, can you guys turn off your mics?
I'm sorry.
Assemblymember Bovie's got to speak. She's running the meeting. She just couldn't because she couldn't speak.
Assemblymember Nauer.
Sorry, I was going to call the question on the amendment.
Any objection to calling the question?
Are we voting on Mr. Young? Okay, we're voting on Mr. Young's amendment.
I do believe, I think Assemblymember Bovie just asked, is there any objection to calling for the question?
Is there any objection to Assemblymember Yunt's amendment? Need to vote on the amendment.
The amendment passed with Assemblymember Hale, Assemblymember Nowers, and Assemblymember Bovie opposed. Now we need to do the primary as amended.
Is there any more discussion on the primary motion as amended?
I call a question.
Assemblymember Nowers.
I had my hand going before. I have a question for the attorney and then a comment. Is there anything in code that requires us to go through a board for salary raises for assembly or mayor?
John Ashman, Deputy Borough Attorney. I'm not aware of anything in code that would mandate that the assembly couldn't take action on salaries, and ultimately the purse strings are held by the assembly. So it makes sense that you would be able to make the decision on salaries notwithstanding any code to the contrary. So ultimately it's your decision. So I would say not to my knowledge, and it makes sense that you make the decision.
Thank you for the clarification on that. You know, no secret that I haven't been supportive of this, and I've done a lot of thinking about it, Mr. McKee, since you proposed it. You know, I think I have two issues with this. One is it's going to bring us more economic development. So we had an economic development director and the assembly got rid of that position. So now we're going to simply give the mayor $45,000 and a directive to get economic development. What is that? And we have no way to hold his or her feet to the fire. One person going out and marketing the borough, I don't see how that adds up to bringing us the kind of economic development we want to bring to the borough. I've got a few more comments. I know you're gonna jump in there. We have very high energy costs and we have very high transportation costs. When you're looking to locate as a business in an area, those are two big things you would look at. Simply having a mayor going out and rah-rah the borough isn't gonna change the underlying financials that people are looking at. They're also looking for stability in a business environment. Again, a mayor going out and rah-rahing isn't going to change a business that looks and says, I have no idea what's going to go in next to me. And I don't feel comfortable making a $5 million, $10 million investment to do that. So I can't see how raising the mayor's salary and telling the mayor to go out and cheerlead for the borough, even though I think that's a great thing for the mayor to do. My second thought, the argument would be that raising the salary would bring you a better candidate. I think we get pretty good candidates. I don't think offering a $75,000 salary is going to get you an executive who's going to jump from a good paying job for an elected position for 3 years. So who's gonna, are you gonna get a Conoco executive who's gonna think, I'm getting $100,000 a year, I'm gonna give up that job and run for mayor or run, and then hope that I get a job back? I just don't think I still think you're gonna get part-timers, and you're gonna get retirees, and hopefully people with good public service. So I just can't, I can't support doing this because it just seems like it doesn't accomplish what we're trying to accomplish and just costs us money. And, in terms of sort of responsibility to the public to say, what are you getting for your extra $45,000, $25,000? We're saying we hope we get some kind of economic development. When I look at it, I just don't see that coming through. So that's where I'm at on this, and that's why I can't support it, although I would support maybe looking again at some other way to bring economic development.
All right, I'd just like to briefly comment. I guess I'm a little confused here as to how we're setting expectations as an assembly, because the mayor doesn't work for us. So at no point will we be reviewing him. I mean, this is an elected position, and in 3 years, the voters can decide if indeed he is doing what we say he's supposed to do. But I mean, if this were a staff, if this was something, that we'd have some control over, that we could go through the manager and say, we don't feel these goals are being met, that would be one thing. But like I said, the mayor does not work for us. He works for the constituents. Assemblymember McKee.
Well, first of all, I've been on the assembly for 5.5 years. And the economic development manager that Ms. Mauer is talking about was not an economic development manager for the borough. It was the economic development manager for the port. Okay, that's why they got rid of it. Okay, it was not for the borough. In the 5.5 years that I've been on the assembly, we have never had anyone pursuing economic development on behalf of the borough, salaried or otherwise. Okay, that's just plain a fact. The other is this, and I'm going to go back and say it again. If we want to be a backwater bedroom community for Anchorage, fine, let's just continue operating like we have in the past. Okay, if you guys are happy with that, I'm not, by the way. I think we can do better. Instead, we'll sit here and we'll give money away to every community here, but we're not trying to bring money in. We just give away money. Okay, so I think for once we have to look at at something that brings money into the borough.
Assemblymember Sumner.
Yeah, while it's true that the mayor doesn't work for us and that we can't fire him, the assembly could actually set official duties for the mayor or for assembly members. And failure to perform official duties is a grounds for recall. So, you can prescribe official duty. You could say that the mayor has to shovel the sidewalk out front of the MSB building every morning. And that would be an official duty of the mayor if that passed the assembly and survived a veto. I think it'd be unlikely, but you could say that you could assign official duties to the mayor. So in that way, you could at least attempt to have a mayor that does something further. But I do think that what Assemblymember Nowers says has a lot of truth to it as far as attracting better candidates. You probably don't get really different candidates for 29,000 or 73,000, or maybe 100,000, but we decided not to go down that road. So yeah, thank you.
Assemblymember Hale.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I came here tonight, I was prepared to approve the $50,000 in its place because that is what is actually in code now. But I am not prepared to go above and beyond that code requirement, so I will be opposing this.
I'd like to echo what Assemblymember Hale said. I was prepared to approve the 50,000. Not so much because I feel like the mayor has to do more, but because I have seen how much the mayor does. And I do feel like we are a really strong borough, and I am very proud of the fact that we are not Anchorage. I think we are attracting businesses. I know we're attracting new families. And I thought the $50,000 pay raise or pay rate was fair. I'm not comfortable with this next jump.
A question.
Assemblymember Nowers.
I just quickly wanted to say, I think the fact is we did have an economic development director. I think we had Don Dyer and I believe Dave Hansen before. And I think they were economic development directors for the borough. And then the other thing is just, I do think this, you talked about bringing revenue in. I just want to say this is not bringing revenue. This is going out, and I'm not sure we get revenue in. So I've said everything I can say on this.
Assemblymember McKee.
I call the question.
Any objection to calling the question?
What
Assemblymember
question are
Young?
we calling? Because the amendment already
It
passed.
is amended.
It's the primary amendment as amended.
Is there an objection to the amended motion? I object. Should
Go
we
ahead.
vote?
It is passed with Assemblymember Hale, Assemblymember Nowers, and Assemblymember Bovee opposed. And just so you know, that was amendment number 3.
We'll go on to amendment number 4. This is Mr. excuse me?
What was that number, 73,000?
It was $73,157.41.
Thank you.
That's it? Oh, Christ, I should have never left the room. Excuse me. Okay, we're gonna go on to amendment number 4. Even though I think this is peripherally about the prior amendment, I'm gonna stay in the room for this one because it's kind of a source of funding. And I wanna be present. Mr. McKee.
I move to adopt.
Assemblymember McKee, if I can get you to turn on your mic.
Gotcha. I move to adopt 21-021. And I move to amend the area-wide fund administration, other professional services by striking $150,000 and
Hold it.
inserting $70,000.
Let the Madam Clerk give you this.
You turned the pages one too many.
I did?
You did.
Oh, my goodness.
We're on that one.
Okay.
That's amendment number 4.
Okay.
Tab B, page 81.
Yes. I move to adopt ordinance 21-021, and this is, I move to amend the area-wide fund mayor expenses outside the borough by adding $7,500 as follows. Okay, $1,800 by striking $1,800 and inserting $5,550, and the travel tickets by striking $3,000 and inserting $6,750 in its place. And I'd like to speak to it.
You got the floor.
The idea here is that if indeed we are expecting the mayor to, in fact, market the borough, that means that they're going to have to travel. $3,000 won't buy you very much travel these days, folks. $401, by the way, from here to round trip here to Fairbanks. So it won't buy you a lot. I would expect that, in fact, the mayor would spend a lot of time down in Juneau. I would expect they would, in fact, fly to Seattle or wherever if they had a business that had some interest in coming to the Matsu Borough, that in fact they would move to promote it. It would also give them a certain amount of expense account. Okay, if you're going to entertain somebody that you want to come to the Matsu Borough, the borough mayor shouldn't have to pay for it out of his own pocket. So that's why I introduced it.
Okay, Mr. Hale.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I came here tonight prepared to support this amendment. I figured if we were going to raise the mayor's salary to $50,000, we should add some travel expenses if we're expecting him to do more. However, we just raised the line item budget for the mayor's salary by an additional $23,000 above and beyond what's in the code. So I'm going to have to oppose this. Maybe we shouldn't be stacking it on stacking on stacking. Pennies make dimes.
Other comments? Mr. Yant?
George, thank you for putting this forth. Whoever the next person is, you can't expect them to travel and take all their time out of their life and treat this, with that many man hours or gal hours, whoever it may be, male or female, on the 29 or even the 50. The reason I chose the 73, 157, 41 is because that's the average of the average Matsu Borough employee. And I really feel like they work very hard for their money, and I want the mayor to do the same thing, the next person, whoever that is. If all they can do is go to Juneau and get us local control of alcohol, you realize that will bring us millions of dollars a year in revenue. All right? We are missing out on so much economic activity right now because we don't have anybody chasing it down, okay? The port's been failing for how long? Okay, it's time to start winning. So I'm gonna support this.
Others? Ms. Nowers?
Push the wrong button. I just, again, have a hard time imagining. I think the alcohol is a good, example of something that could bring us economic development. But beyond that, what do you see? I guess that's a question for Mr. McKee. What business do you see locating here, and how is that different from what the manager would do? But I'm not going to be able to support this, especially with the $73,000 salary.
Others?
Call a question.
Okay, any objection to calling the question by Assemblymember McKee? Seeing none, any objection to passing amendment number 4? There is objection, so.
The amendment failed, Mr. Mayor, with Assemblymember 2, Assemblymember McKee, and Assemblymember Yunt in support.
Okay, so number 4 has failed. Number 5 is one I was actually wanted to be in the room for. But this is yours also, Mr. McKee. Amendment number 5. Yep. Tab B, page 71.
Yeah. I move to amend the area-wide fund Community development, wait a minute, that's not mine. 5. Hold on, gotta go back one. Yes. I move to adopt ordinance 21021. I move to amend the area-wide fund administration other professional charges by striking $150,000 and inserting $70,000 in its place for a reduction of $80,000. And I'd like to speak to it.
You've got the floor.
This obviously, $80,000 is what we are paying for our lobbyists down in Juneau. I feel not that they are not doing what we're paying them for. An elected official has more stroke when talking to other elected officials. Mr. Yount used a good example. We are the alcohol licensing and what have you that we have here, okay? If we could get that, that would add millions to our base up here. That's one of those things that I think only an elected official could get down there. I don't believe a lobbyist could get the legislature to pass that up. So, and this would in fact pay a good share of the mayor's new salary of $73,000 and change, and take care of the objections I have to the lefties to my left, okay?
Other comments? Mr. Sumner?
Yeah, I believe we actually just renewed the lobbyist contract. I think probably in light of everything that's going on right now with the COVID money, some of it being passed through the state and whatnot, it'd be best to let the contract run out, then reassess performance on deliverables from our lobbyists at that time. So I wouldn't be in support of this right at the moment.
Mr. Yount?
Jesse, thank you for bringing that up. If we're in a contract, that's something that I would have a hard time not valuing. And I got a question, I guess, for staff or maybe for Mike, whoever could help me answer, but when this contract comes up, does it go out to bid? Is it a competitive? How many people bid on this in years past?
Through the mayor to Mr. Young, I don't have that information off the top of my head, unfortunately. I believe we put an RFP out in the past, but I can't say that definitively.
Mr. Sumner?
Oh, and I had one other thing I was going to say. When you speak about having currently elected politicians go and talk to other politicians and thinking that's the most effective way, I would argue probably in all reality, it's having formerly elected politicians going and talking to politicians. And I'm sure that at least some of them can't help but think that that might be their future job prospects, you know, because someday they will be formally elected politicians. And a lot of them, believe it or not, end up being employed as lobbyists. So I would argue that probably sending a formerly elected politician to talk to politicians is likely to get you the best results. Maybe not the most wonderful thing in the world, but I think that's probably reality.
Mr. Hale?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to support this for the sole reason that it makes the previous 2 amendments nearly revenue neutral.
Ms. Bovee?
I'm going to oppose this. I think it's still important that we have this lobbyist representation in Juneau.
Mr. McKee?
Well, I will address the issue of a contract, okay? Actually, that contract was not, the multi-year contract was, to my recollection, not put before the assembly, that it was actually a determination and could be legally by the borough manager at the time, okay? I also went and talked to the borough attorney, and he looked at the contract and said, subject to appropriation, okay? That contract could end anytime we don't appropriate the money. So that would handle a thing. And as I say, I went and talked to quite a few people about this because I really wanted to see how we would get the most from the legislature. Remember, when they're down there, they really don't think very much of us. Okay, there's a lot of distance between here and Juneau. Okay, and to have somebody down there saying, "Hey, I was elected by the folks in the Matsu Borough, and this is what they want from you, and you were elected by those same people," gives you a lot more stroke than a lobbyist would have. It just does.
Others, Ms. Nowers?
Because I just have a question, if any staff is willing to offer an opinion, but I think of like this alcohol bill. So now you want to get rid of the lobbyists, and then the mayor is supposed to be flying down to Seattle to bring up business and monitoring everything in Juneau and doing ceremonial duties. I just, like, in terms of the borough's effectiveness in getting our priorities passed in Juneau, I don't even know how to phrase this question, but how effective do staff think we can be without having a presence down there and hoping that whoever is elected as mayor somehow is suitable and suited to do that? I just, you may get somebody who's had no political experience down in Juneau. I worry about this sabotaging us for our effectiveness.
Well, I'll just comment on, this is the one I really wanted to stay aboard on to comment on. Mr. Harris has been our lobbyist for quite a few years, and I've admired him and respected him, and have thought he has a great rapport in Juneau. It's pretty obvious when you travel through the offices in Juneau, visiting people with Mr. Harris, what he does for us. I do not think if you raise the mayor's salary, which I guess the clerk says you did, I do not think you should offset it with this money, taking away a very effective lobbyist. Mr. Souls is here too, and I know that he's part of that package, and I just am completely opposed to this amendment. I think Mr. McKee's not surprised. I told him the funding of I would keep Mr. Harris on for forever if I could. So that's what I have to say. Mr. Yount?
I call the question.
Oh, any objection to calling a question? I spaced out, excuse me. No objection to calling the question. So any objection to passing amendment number 5? There is objection.
Mr. Mayor, it has failed with Assembly members 2, McKee, and Hale in support.
Amendment number 6, Mr. 2, this will be yours.
I move ordinance number 21021, area-wide community development, community enrichment program. I move to amend the area-wide fund community development, community enrichment, and other contractual 429.900 by striking $0 and inserting the 27,500 in its place.
Okay, you can speak to it if you wish.
As we went up there this last week and we heard from the folks, they use that money to keep the school open for the children and the folks in that area to recreate and to come together as a community. And I think $27,000, 500 investment in the community is money well spent.
Ms. Bovee, then Mr. Hale.
Yeah, I have a question for Mr. 2, and I'd like to follow up. Currently, the program funds 3 community programs. Are we limiting this to Talkeetna now?
Well, that's where we were when they were speaking of it. And if it does help other communities, then I'm happy to help them all.
Okay, because Willow spoke to it as well. May I follow up? Thank you. I would like to make a few comments on this one. I've supported this program in the past. It was my budget amendment that restored the funding at least 1 year, possibly both. I don't remember if Mr. Sykes supported it the first year. I participated in community enrichment programs with my family, both in Talkeetna and in Willow. I think it's a great program. But I don't think it's fair that Talkeetna is the only school that gets a paid activities director. I have 10 schools in my district, 8 of which are Title I schools. There are over 40 schools in the borough. They all would benefit from this program. This is part of the reason we set up the Youth 360 program in Houston and Wasilla to provide these types of opportunities. My granddaughter attends Big Lake Elementary. I know she would enjoy the activities this program would offer, but I don't see this as something the Mat-Su Borough should be paying for. These are after-school and weekend programs primarily taking place on school grounds, and this should be organized and funded by the school district. But instead, we're asking a borough staff member to manage a grant program that pays a school district employee to do a school district job. We already give the school district the lion's share of our property tax dollars, and they're receiving a decent amount of COVID money the next 2 years as well. They can afford to provide this program district-wide. I'd love to be able to give the community enrichment program director position to each of my schools, but as a borough, we can't, and I can't justify showing favoritism to Talkeetna. I've already spoken to the school district about funding this program. It is under consideration. I will continue to work hard to find alternative funding options for Talkeetna, but I cannot support this amendment.
Okay, Mr. Hale?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to support this. This is another thing, like libraries. This is exactly why we have local government. These are the kind of things that local government does well and that we want it to do. And I'm gonna support this amendment, and I'm going to speak to my community council out in Glacier View and tell them about the program and see if they can get something started out there as well, because it sounds amazing.
Mr. Sumner?
If I'm not mistaken, this started out as a school district program, and I think that it would be appropriate that it reverts back to being run by the district. I would have to agree with Deputy Mayor Bovee on this. I don't think it's appropriate that we are funding this, and in particular, in such a mismatched way as well. Effectively, almost all the funding goes to just one area. So I would oppose this.
Ms. Bovee?
Assemblymember Hale, I appreciate the fact you want to expand this program. Are you going to be taking some of the 27.5 for your districts, or how are we going to be spending that? I'm just curious.
Hale?
I imagine it takes some time to set these kind of programs up, and if another community wanted to join this type of program, set this kind of thing up, we could address it with next year's budget.
Ms. Nowers, then we'll have Mr. Tu wrap up and vote on this.
I think I'm gonna be supporting this because I don't want to see the community left in the lurch, but I do appreciate that this does sound like it should very much be under the school district umbrella, and I'd like to see that worked on over the next year or whatever the appropriate time frame is to switch it back to the school district. And if they want to refund us the 27.5, that would be great too.
Mr. Tu, any wrap-up comments? Your amendment. Okay.
Call the question.
Okay, question's been called. Any objection to calling the question? Seeing none, any objection to passing amendment number 6 by Mr. Tu? There is objection, so go ahead.
The amendment has passed with Assemblymember Sumner, Assemblymember McKee, and Assemblymember Bovee opposed.
Amendment number 6 has passed. Boy, I used to grovel all the time trying to get that community enrichment in the budget, so thank you, Mr. Tu. I was going to give the manager the Gwench Award for pulling it out of the budget, but they saved you. Okay, amendment number 7, Mr. Sumner.
I move to amend the area-wide fund, finance, common contractual, other contractual by striking 862,000 and inserting 140,000 in its place for a reduction of $722,000. I'd speak to it. This removes the funding for giving taxpayer dollars to NPI, which I think is entirely inappropriate for a number of reasons. Number one, under our agreement with NPI, we are supposed to receive the first 100% of the revenue until we receive $722,000. So by doing this, we'll be foregoing that first $722,000 that we would otherwise get. So it is certain that the ongoing lease payments will therefore be forfeit in part to NPI, and we will be giving them $722,000, and only in exchange to offset some remote possibility that suddenly there's a bonanza down there where we have an enormously increased revenue. And that would have to be effectively a stepwise function where there's very little revenue, and then at 10 years from when we set the clock at the expiry, then suddenly there's a jump in revenue. Whereas, you know, a situation it seems very unlikely. In all likelihood, we'll have much of the same as what we've had, very little revenue, possibly some increasing revenue. It is possible that we you know, secure a large carrier or something like Matson wants to come in and bring cargo. But I think in that situation, we could happily buy them out. But I think that that's a low probability event that we shouldn't pay for with the certainty of shelling out these taxpayer dollars. And this could also pay for all the increases that we just passed as amendments, more than offset them. So we'd still be able to stay under 10 mil. Otherwise, the mill rate will be going up above what's proposed.
Mr. Yant?
I agree wholeheartedly. Now's not the time. We don't owe it to these guys to front them the money. Let's see how we perform at the port. And in the meantime, let's take the first 722 100% here. So I support your amendment, Jesse. Thank you.
Any other comments? This is kind of a technical thing, and you know, it's triggering the time element with NPI. To close out on NPI quicker is, I know Mr. Spropus is not here with us tonight, but just remember, I'm just cautioning you about your vote. NPI has controlled the two most important pieces of land down in the borough, and we finally worked out an agreement with them. And this would shorten the time period considerably. That's all it does. Mr. Sumner?
Oh, I did have one other thing. I'd asked the finance director if she could do some analysis on this, and I was curious if she had.
Through the mayor to Assemblymember Sumner, I am still working with Teresa at the port to get those numbers for you.
Mr. McKee?
I would move to postpone this until Thursday.
Okay, there's a motion to postpone until Thursday. Same as amendment number 1. Any objection? We'll get I guess we got an objection, but I just had a question. You could get that information by, okay. Mr. Hale, do you object to this? Okay, so why don't you vote on the motion to continue till Thursday evening, time certain. Any objection to that?
Assemblymember Sumner, can I get you to vote? We're voting on the postponing to 5:13.
What are we doing? We're voting on postponing.
Yes.
Till Thursday.
Are you good with your vote?
Okay, the same as amendment 1.
And that is passed with Assemblymember Sumner, Hale, and Nowers opposed.
Okay, so amendment number 7 is continued. Amendment number 8. Ms. Nowers?
Thank you. I would move to amend capital projects grants, pre-design and engineering, West Susitna access by striking 100,000, inserting 50,000 on its place for a reduction of 50,000, and like to move that and speak to it. Okay. So I support having the borough do the outreach on this. I think it's important that the public have a voice, but I think 50,000 is sufficient. I think we're to the point in the public process where we have a very good sense of what the questions are, and I think we can have targeted outreach that tries to get the community's concerns answered. And so I think 50,000 is an adequate amount for a contractor to come in and facilitate that kind of outreach. And I don't think we're starting from square one. So that's why I suggest, just as a savings measure, and that 50,000 is enough to do that work.
Mr. Hale, then Mr. McKee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to support this. Honestly, if Ada wants us to do their public outreach, they should be paying us.
Now, is it permissible to amend this?
Yes, it is.
I would like to amend this to delete $100,000, which would reduce the total amount to zero. And I'd speak to my amendment.
Madam Clerk, you got the amendment? He's zeroing it out.
Look, we're still trying to get information on this thing, very basic information. For instance, we still don't know what the access road is going to be. We have one access road that shows on a map. There are 3 others that are on consideration that I was told by the land management manager, in fact, have not been set forth yet. So we're not even looking, we don't even know what the access points are on that thing right now. So I think until we actually have a really good look at what this thing, where it's going and how much it's going to cost and where it's going to intrude in tribal lands and that kind of thing, until we have that, I don't think we ought to appropriate a nickel for it.
Let's see, Mr. Yount.
In regard to George's comments, is this money going to help us figure those answers out? Right? I think that's something we should all consider. I want to make sure the Matsu Borough has a voice at the table, and I like where Stephanie's going with this, and I even like George's idea, but again, I just want to make sure that, there's a lot of things unknown about this West Susitna access right now, and at some point, we're probably going to have to bring it up and vote on it, and it is a huge, huge project that could be a really beneficial thing or a really negative thing on our community, right? And I do have my concerns that if we lower this at all, that we may not get the information that we need.
So, Mr. Two?
I say before we do anything, we postpone this till Thursday, see if we can get a hold of Ada to come and give us a little bit of insight, what they want the money for, and then we'll make a decision.
Well, Mr. Manager, with all due respect, what is this money actually? It's borough money in the borough budget. What is it actually used for?
Yeah, so through the mayor to the assembly, this money would not go to Ada. This is money that the borough would appropriate and maintain to use to basically engage with a contractor to help us through the public engagement portion of the process. Ada already has a phase 3 scope with a company that includes the remainder of the engineering and study work that needs to be done. What they've asked us to partner with is to take on the public engagement, public involvement process and assist with that because we're the local governing body. This allows us to basically reach out and get some additional capacity where we do not have that internally, either in terms of staff or the right tools necessarily to engage on a project like this. So the thought process was we would retain the funding, so we retain control of how it's spent and make sure that the engagement is done to our liking instead of handing that over to Ada and asking them to do that on our behalf.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Manager. So we're on the amendment now, Mr. McKee's amendment, which actually reduces the amount of 100,000 to zero instead of the 50,000. So, Mr. Yount, you want to speak to that? We're on amendment.
No, I don't. Yeah.
Okay, we had kind of a request for postponement. I should get back to Mr. Two. Do you still want to take the postponement up after listening to the manager?
No, I think the manager kind of told us, but now, so I understand now this 100,000 will actually stay right here with the borough, and the borough will spend this 100,000 in outreach
That's correct.
for this project. Yeah,
That's correct.
okay, thank you.
So, but the amendment before us right now is from Mr. McKee. He takes, instead of seeing for a reduction of 50,000, it's a reduction down to 0. He's reducing by 100,000. Everybody understand that? Ms. Bovee?
Yeah, I oppose Mr. McKee's amendment. I think it's really important that we do a better job with outreach. We've, for whatever reason, we want to
Okay, on the amendment.
determine, we need money, at least 50,000 for outreach. Thank you.
Okay, let's vote on the amendment. It's basically zeroes it out. Any objection to the amendment? Yes, there is objection. So go ahead and vote on the amendment now. Mr. McKee's.
Mr. Mayor, it has failed with Assemblymember Sumner, Assemblymember McKee, and Assemblymember Hale in support.
So now we're back to Senator Nowers' original amendment, a reduction of striking 100,000 and inserting 50,000. Any objection to that amendment? Amendment number 8. Go ahead.
Does the borough manager, Mike, do you feel that $50,000 will actually be enough money for the borough to actually perform this outreach that we need to do?
Yeah, through the mayor to Mr. Tu, I think at this point, $50,000 is adequate to get started. We're at this point, I mean, comments, we understand there's a lot we do not know about what this road and the overall project would look like. What this does is allows us to engage with a contractor to go through the phase 3 process and participate in public engagement. So at this point, answer, yes, I think so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Yant?
Earlier, I had concerns that lowering this from 100 to 50 might take away our voice at the table and might not lead to us getting our questions answered engineering wise and different things. And, you know, thank you to the manager for answering that. I fully support Stephanie's amendment here, knowing that there'll still be money in there for public outreach and that we're not jeopardizing engineering and knowledge in doing so.
Okay, any objection on amendment number 8 to passing it from Mr. McKee is objecting? So go ahead and vote. Now it's Ms. Nowers' original amendment. $100,000 down to 50,000 for borough outreach on the West Susitna project.
Mr. Mayor, the motion passed with Assemblymember Sumner and McKee opposed.
8 has passed. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Amendment number 9, Mr. Sumner.
I move to amend the area-wide fund assembly dues and fees by striking 41,000 and inserting 20,993 in its place for a reduction of $20,007.
Okay,
Can I speak to
that's
it?
not number 9.
Oh, I didn't move the other one.
Pardon?
I think he went past it. He's not moving it right now, Mr. Mayor.
And so are you withdrawing number 9?
It's not moved. There is no amendment 9 that has been moved besides this one.
I know, like we get it. Are you withdrawing number 9? It's in the packet. We filed it. It's-
They go past them all the time. That's why I had to say.
Okay, do I have to do my numbering over, Madam Clerk?
Yeah.
I hate this.
That's right. You numbered it too soon. But I would speak to this.
So which amendment are you on there, Mr. Sumner?
Number 9.
Number 9. I tell you, budgeting used to be a little bit easier. Okay, do number 9, Mr. Sumner. I know. See, thank you, Mr. Tu.
I think I already moved it, but I could speak to it if that's all right. I would just point out that AML did in the past accept this amount from us in exchange for our membership, and I think they would again. And I don't see a reason to give them a penny more than what they'll take. So yeah, Why send more money to AML for something that we can get for half the money? And they'd just be lighting it on fire. We get half off.
Ms. Heindel, is that how it works? That'd be, Madam Clerk, is that how it works?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I can answer you that in 2020, they gave us a prorated bill.
What does that mean?
It's because we didn't fund them, so we weren't in AML for a certain period of time, and they gave us a prorated bill.
So part-time, part of the
Part
year,
of it,
partial
yes.
year.
Yes.
Okay. So the annual dues are how much?
They do have a range. This year, they're $40,034.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Sumner, now that we got all the facts on. Ms. Snowers, thank you.
Thinking I might make you an offer on a house that I'd like you to build for me. Yeah, I think this is, I can't take this one seriously. That isn't how it works with AML. And I would just speak to some of the value that AML has out there. It's a forum that brings municipalities and borough officials together and looks at it from the Alaska perspective. They have a amazing amount of analysis and calls, bringing together borough officials that help you understand things. If you want to understand, for example, why the Denali Borough felt like they got short shrift on the ARP plan and how the feds were looking at changing the allocations because of that, you can find that out. If you want to know why a sales tax is so opposed by Southeast communities, and if we're trying to figure out our fiscal plan, you could, get together with those people, and there's no other forum I can think of that provides that. And then I would speak to one very specific example where having AML paid off. When we were fashioning our economic grant program, the original template for how to do ours came from AML. They had shared from Kodiak, and they also shared sort of best practices and pitfalls. So in terms of not falling into some of those pitfalls that allowed fraud to happen or people to feel like the money was unfairly sent out there, and how to structure the grant program in terms of the questions you asked and how the money was allocated. Like, that gave us a leg up to know about some of the mistakes. I mean, if you looked around the country and you know about the fraud that happened with people falsely applying, like, we didn't fall into that trap in part because we were able to know about some of those things that had happened. So I think they're a very valuable organization to be part of, and the idea that you can offer them half is not a serious deal. So I'm going to oppose this.
Ms. Bovee?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I oppose this. We're better than this. We don't cheat. We pay our bills. This is embarrassing. Thank you.
Mr. Hale?
Yeah, I just gonna go back to the other year when we were only in AML for half the year, and that's why they took the half price. I don't think they're gonna take half price for a full year's membership. If we want to talk about, dropping out of AML again, that's a whole different conversation, but just cutting the price in half without, I don't think they're gonna go for it, so.
Others? Okay, on amendment number 9, is there an objection to passing, Mr. Sumner?
You don't know until you try.
Well, yeah.
Really.
You kind of do, though.
I'm sure they'd
Common
let us
sense
rejoin
kinda
after a week
applies
or
in
so.
a lot of different ways in life. On amendment number 9, there's objection to passing amendment number 9. There's objection, so please vote.
Mr. Mayor, it failed with Assembly Members Sumner and McKee in support.
Ten, formerly Amendment 11. Amendment 10, whose is this? Mr. Sumner. We're going to give you the Busy Body Award for this budgeting cycle.
I move to amend mileage outside of borough, expense reimbursement outside of borough, and travel tickets throughout the budget as follows. Area-wide, Fund 100, strike $150,162. Non-area-wide, Fund 200, strike $6,750. Enhanced 911, Fund 202, strike $12,760. Land Management, Fund 203, strike $200. Fire Fleet Maintenance, Fund 245, strike $7,100. Caswell FSA, Fund 248, strike $2,200. Westlake's FSA, Fund 249, strike $15,000. Central Matsu FSA, Fund 250, strike $99,000. Butte FSA, Fund 251, strike $8,300. Talkeetna FSA, Fund 254, strike $1,400. Willow FSA, Fund 258, strike $4,300. Admin Road Service Areas, strike $265. Talkeetna Water and Sewer SSA, Fund 293, strike $1,000. Solid Waste Fund 510, strike $18,900. And Port Fund 520, strike $5,200. And I'd speak to the amendment.
Go ahead, please.
This would take all the travel funds out, all the outside of borough travel funds from all the budgets for an overall total of $332,447, with the exception for the manager, the mayor, the attorney, and the clerk's budgets. And I think that part of the reason for this, aside from the fact that COVID is still a thing, is that the world has changed. A lot of these meetings and conferences can be attended over Zoom. We really don't have a reason to be sending a lot of these folks, like people from solid waste, outside of the borough, paying for tickets to travel. I mean, if some exceptional need comes up, then we could address it then. But I really don't think that in this environment, we need to be paying for this. And, you know, I think a lot of these things can just be done by over Zoom or remote meetings. We really don't have a reason to pay for it. And we could strike, you know, $250,000 from the budget right here, which would pay more than pay for all the additions that we all just voted in. Thank you.
Ms. Bovee, then Mr. Yant.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, a number of these are FSAs, which means it really won't affect the mill rate per se. And we can't use money saved by the fire service area to fund any of our other extravagances. Secondly, a number of these were actually approved by advisory boards. And so I'm really opposed to changing their budget on them. Can we hear from the directors from the port manager and public works and emergency services and land management as far as why they do need to travel out of the borough? Thank you. Anybody else I forgot, come up too, because I'm not sure who all falls under area-wide and non-area-wide. It's a little
Mr.
vague.
Dolan coming forward, Mr. Barkley, and Ms. Dolan. Go ahead, please.
Terry Dolan, Director of Public Works. We do as much training as we possibly can within the borough, but there are several courses that are run by the state that aren't available here in the borough. We send employees to Fairbanks for training, for traffic management training that the state provides. And you just can't get it here. There's a number of other things too. The landfill folks, there's specialized training events that are specific to skills needed in landfills that just aren't available here in the state. That's the only time that we leave the state or leave the boroughs when we absolutely have to. So when you take those funds away, it means that we're not able to train our folks adequately. So I would recommend leaving it in there.
Mr. Barkley?
Ken Barkley, Director of Emergency Services. I'll speak on the fire side of it first. So for those folks, we send people out for the fire academy to get certifications, keep up their licensing for firefighting. We also send them out for train the trainer courses. So we try to reduce travel that way. And then a lot of their certificates for promotions. They have to have certain training and certain education and degrees before they get promoted. We have them on an actual enhancement course to get promoted. And the courses we send them to are only for those enhanced training. So for the firefighters, it's very critical for them to get out. Also with new technology and new tools, they have to go out and get trained on it. Sometimes we do try to get instructors to come in, which that's an expense as well. So that's what we do with the fire side of it. So it's very critical to their operation to have those travel expenses. For the fleet maintenance, what we're doing with them, they're going out to get their certifications and keep their certifications. That saves the borough thousands of dollars. The one big one is our fleet maintenance is a certified repair station for all of our diesels, all of our pumps, all of our equipment on the trucks, and all the manufacturers we work with. We are a certified repair station. So if something breaks down, we're not paying to have them send a mechanic up here. Then we have to house them, pay per diem while they're here. So it's actually saving us money to send our mechanics out for their education, training, and to keep them certified.
Is there a question for our speaker, Mr. Sumner?
How many folks did you send out last year?
We couldn't send any. There was a travel, we couldn't send anybody out because of COVID.
When are you sending folks out this year?
We have 2 classes set up to go out. As soon as they're ready or open up to a lot of the plants, even though COVID's lifting in areas, the manufacturers and plants have not. So we're waiting for them to give us the green light. That's why we're waiting on equipment to be built, trucks, fire trucks as well. So until we can go out to their training, we're kind of held up right now.
Did we have to send people out to pick up ambulances and things like that?
So for the ambulances, it's the same thing. So we also we purchased the equipment. We have 2 trips back, a pre-build and then a final build before it gets sent here. That has saved us a lot of money and downtime because we can correct the problems down at the plant before they're sent here. Otherwise, the truck's sitting here, then we have to wait for the manufacturers to come up and make the repairs. So that was another example. It saves us money.
Ms. Nowers, did you have a question for Mr. Barkley?
I just had a question. I know it's getting down in the weeds, but I did look at Central Matsu, and the expenses of travel outside the borough had jumped from 10,000 to 85,000.
So what Central's trying to do right now is they're trying to be the hub for training. We're wanting to bring other departments in and get the training. So we're sending them out to get the train the trainer education, and also the new props that they purchased, they're getting the training on those. That's why. Eventually they'll be able to recoup some of that by doing the training for the borough.
Thank you.
Let's see, Mr. Yant, then Mr. Sumner.
Thank you. Through the mayor, this is going to be directed at all 3 of you gentlemen who are speaking on behalf of it. And honestly, Mike, I know we can't we're not going to sit here and go through every single line item and talk about every single department. I know that. So I just want to ask, is there any of you guys that feel like with where Zoom is at now that you could do any of this with that? And if you could, would it be a third, half, 2/3, just an idea? Or do you feel like all of these different areas that affect you absolutely have to be done in person, physically touching the location?
I can answer for emergency services. Right now, it's not a Zoom class we can go to. It's a hands-on training. So obviously we can't do Zoom with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Dolan, is that?
Other directors who want to speak on?
Yeah, please do. Anybody that can help me answer this, I would appreciate it.
Just on your travel and some of the issues that are being presented.
Teresa Dolan, Port Operations Manager. The money that I put in my budget for travel was to attend trade shows that we had talked about in February as part of the big marketing push. And those take place all over the country, and some are in Europe, which is where some of the largest ports are.
Thank you.
So in Public Works, as far as using Zoom for training, really, we already are doing that to the extent we can. I had about 6 employees doing SWIP training by Zoom this year. So we are already taking advantage of that when it's offered. But there's a lot of these very technical things that either require hands-on or, they're uniquely offered at a location and not necessarily over Zoom. So we've taken that into account when we provided those budget numbers.
Thank you.
I have a comment when the directors are finished.
Yeah, Eric Phillips, Community Development. I just wanted to comment that for 9 employees, I have $200. So I think we've got that budget pretty well pared down, but if you want to go to 0, have at it.
All right, you win best comment for the night. Mr.
Coach
Hayes?
Hayes, acting animal care director. We do have some classes that primarily the veterinarian and our officers can't get through Zoom. The veterinarian either has to go down the lower 48 or sometimes they come up to Anchorage and they teach them there, but she's got to do in-person ones. And then the officers also have to get some certification training on large animals and other classes that they have, particularly for angry dogs, if you will. They've got one that I don't know what the formal name is, but Matt Hardwig has said that they do have to go to the lower 48 for some of their classes.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Strawn, and then Mr. Wyatt. We'll wrap up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have, first of all, our floodplain managers. We have 6 floodplain managers within our department. Through FEMA, they pay for our travel tickets and our lodging, but they fly our floodplain managers down to Emmitsburg, Maryland. There are some costs associated with that, with parking, with driving to Anchorage to do the airport shuttle, and then also the food while they're down there, they have to pay for. So bring it to 0 would eliminate that, and we'd have a hard time meeting those certifications, those continuing education credits. There are some classes available online, but for the most part, you run out of those options really quick. And then I would say that we used to send our planners down to the National Planning Conference. I've been to a few of them myself. We've really reduced that over the past few years. I will say that this year, the National APA Conference is being hosted, be it via this technology, but we don't anticipate that they'll do that next year. And actually going down to, say, New Orleans and looking at their flood structures and what they've done down there, actually doing the mobile tours is an incredibly enriching experience that it kind of can change your perspective on how you plan and how other places are planning and how we can apply those to how we're doing it here. And then we also have surveyors training for our platting officer who's required to maintain his platting certification, which can happen in Fairbanks or Anchorage or something like that. That does require some budget for out of borough travel.
Okay. Mr. Wyatt, did you have anything? And we'll wrap up with that.
Yes. Eric Wyatt, IT Director. And I will apologize. I thought I'd already cut all of this out of my budget, but I just looked at it and there was about $43,000 in there that I would not use. There is some out of state, out of borough, I should say, out of borough travel that is very effective for some of the training we do, but a lot of that's just in Anchorage. So that's very minimal to drive down there and use some parking and whatnot. But I would say that as part of the area-wide number, there's 40 to 45,000 that I would certainly cut from mine. That number is far too high.
So through the mayor of the assembly real quick, I agree with Mr. Sumner. The world has changed and we'll look for those opportunities. The problem is we don't know exactly what it's changed to yet from a training and conference perspective. If this amendment were to go as is, we wouldn't even be able to reimburse mileage expenses for classes in Anchorage.
Mr. Hale, and then Mr. Young.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Having recently taken the Certified Erosion and Sediment Control Lead class on Zoom, I appreciate Mr. Dolan's comments, but there are in fact things that you cannot do on Zoom. And I'm going to defer to the experts in the administration and on the fire service and road service area boards. And I'm going to oppose this.
Mr. Yount?
Jesse, I love where your head's at on this. But having heard what we heard here, this is going to be hard for me to support a lot of this. But man, I really appreciate the honesty here. If you really believe, and I'm going to tell you, I don't think you guys should be driving Anchorage paying for parking for nothing. I don't think you should reduce your budget by $43,000 to $45,000. But if you think there's some juice in there and you want to bring that number down to a more reasonable one, I would love to hear that if you don't mind.
Mr. Sumner?
Yeah, I actually moved to postpone this one till Thursday, and I may at that point amend it to be more targeted.
So the motion to continue this till Thursday evening deliberations. Any objection? Mr. Hale, there's objection.
So we're on a motion to postpone until 5:13. There's been a motion or an objection, so we'll need to vote.
Just have a question. We have already postponed one item.
Two.
Thank you.
You're doing pretty good. You started out kind of bad.
The motion to postpone has passed with Assemblymember Hale opposed.
So Amendment 10 is continued to Thursday night, and that leaves our packet. So we have 3 amendments that were continued to Thursday night. If there's new amendments, try to get them to the clerk as soon as you possibly can. So, Mr. Yount?
I don't know if now's the place or the time for this, or if it should be Thursday, but I would like to bring forth an amendment on the floor if that's possible. It would mirror very similar to what George did years ago for the My House organization, but put some requirements on it. If I were to bring forth an amendment for $100,000 to help kick off that facility, which I do think our entire community will benefit from immensely. And I think you guys have known me long enough to know there's nothing in this world I value more than kids. Mine are very blessed. They're very lucky to have 2 loving parents in their life and no issues. I know a lot of kids are not. And I can tell you wholeheartedly, nobody does more for the underprivileged and youth in our community than Michelle. So I would like to bring forth an amendment. And I don't know if this is even legal, but if we could put a requirement that she goes out and gets at least 2-to-1 matching on that $100,000. So is now the time for that, sir? Or
Well,
should I-
we could just have it in writing for Thursday night. It'll be,
Okay.
we could take it up first if you want to. And then we got the 3 motions continued. I think everybody's got an idea of what you're doing. And so any objection to that? There'll be a 4th amendment for sure. If there's more, just get them in writing to the clerk.
And I know to help me prepare for Thursday, I know Nick's not here right now, but can I put those requirements on that? Is that?
I believe so.
I mean,
Mr.
legally.
Ashbrenner?
Okay.
John Ashenbender, Deputy Borough Attorney. I don't know the answer to that right off the top of my head, so I'll have to look into that and consult with Mr. Sharopoulos.
Sounds like a probably from the legal department. Sorry. Okay, Ms. Bovee, why don't you move us the ordinance to May 13th for us?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to continue ordinance 21-021 to May 13, 2021.
Any discussion? Any objection? Hearing no objection, the ordinance is continued to May 13th, Thursday night. There's been no vetoes issued so far. Comments? Mr. Manager has some comments.
To the mayor, to the assembly, just another update on ordinance 21041 that you passed last week. That was the $4.3 million grant for COVID-19 related activities. So since then, the Mat-Su Health Foundation has worked with the cities and the State Department of Health and Social Services to see what could be done to secure appropriations of that CDC Health Equity grant so that it would include the cities. The state suggested they could actually bypass the cities and the borough and award the funds directly to the Mat-Su Health Foundation. The contractual arrangement would be between the state and the Mat-Su Health Foundation. This would require a letter from each jurisdiction giving the state the okay to award these funds to the Mat-Su Health Foundation to administer. The benefit is that this allows all funding to be administered by one entity across the entire borough and removes the borough from the middle of the equation. Matsu Health Foundation will still be conducting the activities described to the Assembly and are willing to share reports and provide updates as requested. I do not intend to execute the agreement approved by the Assembly and instead intend to support award directly to the Matsu Health Foundation unless there is objection by the Assembly. The attorney and the finance director support this approach as well. So I just wanted to make that announcement. It'll take the borough out of the middle, and it'll allow the Matsu Health Foundation to have funding from the cities of Palmer, Wasilla, Houston, and the borough to administer programs borough-wide. So if there's no significant objection, I won't actually be executing the agreement that the Assembly approved last week. Thank you.
Mr. Yount?
I don't want to overstep our staff, but I do got to mention here, I have concerns with us not being in the middle. I don't know how long we're going to be playing this whole game, right? We have a governor's race coming up next year. I don't know who's going to be in charge next. I want to really, I need to put this out there. I've said it last time, but I cannot support any money going anywhere where we're going to be incentivizing people to get a vaccine that's still not even an actual vaccine. It's an EUA, which is an emergency use authorization. To anybody that gets it, I wholeheartedly support you on that. Anybody that doesn't, I also support you on that. And I want to make sure that we do play a role in this process moving forward. I'm not trying to burden our staff, but it worries me that if it's just the state of Alaska handing the money over to them and we can't keep tabs on what they're doing with it, that things are going to be happening in our community that I cannot support. So I had to put that out there.
Mr. Manager? Mr. Sumner?
Well, I actually would support that. I mean, if it's state money going directly to a recipient and we're not, we can be not involved, then it's really not our business. I mean, the state gives a lot of money to a lot of folks, and we don't put ourselves in the middle of every single state spending decision. So if we can exit out of being a middleman on this, it's probably beneficial. I mean, I just don't see where we'd want to be involved. If they can directly grant money to somebody, then let them do it. State money, and yeah.
Ms. Nowers?
I was going to say something very similar. We don't have health powers, and we're not health adjudicators, and people have recourse. The borough has recourse if they feel like the state isn't spending it correctly. We can, they can lobby the state that they don't feel like that's correct. But I think it just inserts one more level of bureaucracy, and so I'm for less bureaucracy and let the state handle it.
So, Mr. Manager, the money was directed straight to the Matsu Health Foundation.
Well, Mr. Mayor, what we would do is I would sign a letter to state DHSS telling them that we're okay with giving our portion of that grant directly to the Matsu Health Foundation for administering. They'll still have to follow the eligible use that was already in the grant, which is what we were going to build our terms and conditions around in our grant agreement. So I don't see the allowable use changing from what was described last week. We just won't be in the middle overseeing that and reporting on it.
Mr. Sumner, Mr. Yount?
We wouldn't be a subrecipient in any way, right? And not a party to the grant? Okay, yeah, so.
That's correct.
Mr. Yount?
I totally understand the desire to not have our staff involved, and I definitely see Stephanie and Jesse's point on this. So I'm gonna support us in this, and I will work with Todd and Mike in the future and monitor it myself with Mr. Smolden and Mr. Dunleavy, and hope to heck that this is behind us by the time we have another election next year. So thank you.
Ms. Bovee, then Mr. Hale.
Thank you. I agree. If we do not need to be involved, I prefer we weren't.
Mr. Hale?
I'm on the same page as Mr. Nowers, or Mrs. Nowers, Mr. Sumner, and Mrs. Bovee.
I'd hate to see all seven of you on the same page. No. Mr. Manager, do you have some comments?
No, just through the mayor to Mr. Young. I think, the Matsu Health Foundation, when I talked to Ms. Ripley, was still willing to come in and provide updates to the assembly. And I guess, being accountable in that way because she understands the authority that the local governing body has. So I think it's still fair that we would request them to bring in updates and kind of talk about what they're doing with the use of the funds. I think what's really helpful here and why I'm a fan of this idea, and Mayor Ledford can correct me if I'm wrong, but this really allows us to administer all of the funding area-wide where we don't have the authority to do that. So it really does create some challenges for the administration of this if we don't have it all under one umbrella, just because of the limitations of health powers and what we do. So that's why I see the benefit to the community as a whole. It's not as much about, I just want to be clear, it's not as much about avoiding work as it is, I think it's just easier to administer and use the funding in a way that's more beneficial to the community.
Okay, was there a time limit on the use of the money? Ms. Heidel?
I believe the grant ran till 2023, or something like that.
Okay, everybody, any problems with what the manager is doing? Okay, any objections? You're good to go. Any other comments, Mr. Sumner?
Yeah. I'd just like to comment that while I think my house is a fine organization and I'd love to give them a grant, I will not be able to support that unless we can find somewhere in the budget to make a reduction of some sort. And before we take that up, because I will not vote for a mill rate that is above the proposed one. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Yant, Ms. Nauer's comments, and we'll go to Mr. Yant.
We can go with Stephanie first.
Maybe we can take from the mayor's salary?
Watch it now, watch it.
I just appreciated the discussion tonight. I learned some things. So I appreciated some of the amendments that were put forward. It was good to hear about some of the things that are being done. And I just want to, know, Mr. Phillips, how he's going to arrange that $200 trip to Europe, all expenses paid. And I think there's some good deals on Alaska Airlines.
Now, Mr. Yant.
First, I want to apologize to the birthday boy. This was not your day. So we're looking forward to see you on Thursday. Happy birthday to another fellow Taurus. So, and then, yeah, I agree with Jesse wholeheartedly. So between now and Thursday, I didn't reconcile everything here. My guess is Cheyenne did in her head along the way tonight, but for any proposed reductions, I know the NPI one alone was pretty large, and I agree. I don't want to increase the mill rate. I too want to lower it, and so we'll address that on Thursday.
Okay, Mr. McKee, comments for tonight?
I want to assure Mr. Sumner that on Thursday night, I will have proposed an amendment that will in fact take care of the contribution to my house.
Okay. You got that figured out then?
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Two, comments? You okay, Mr. Hale?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to thank the administration for handing us a budget this year that I could have voted for unchanged. And I want to thank my fellow assembly members for keeping it short tonight. And looks like I might have a whole hour before I have to go to bed.
Okay, Ms. Bovee.
Enjoy the rest of your birthday, Assemblymember Hale.
Okay. Madam Clerk, please.
Especially for the new members, make sure you bring back your pink budget amendment packet, because the first things we will be doing on Thursday are the items that were postponed. And if you have any more amendments, please get them to me by noon tomorrow so I can get a packet together, and that packet will be a different color so you know what packet we're in. So please let me know by noon tomorrow if you have any more amendments.
So amendments, which amendments are in the pink package? Number one, and number
1 was postponed. Let me get there, Mr. Mayor. Number 7 was postponed.
and the last one.
And I think it's the last one, yep. And then number 10 was postponed.
Okay, so 3 postponements in that pink one and a new amendment from Mr. Yount coming in. And any other amendments, please get them to the clerk. With that, I thought, It went reasonably well tonight. Very good amendments, pretty good debate. So we will close out tonight. We'll adjourn, what is it, 8:40? 8:40 PM adjourned.